All right, I think we're about to get started. Lori, and there are a lot of people who brought questions with them. Who here brought questions with them that haven't given them to me yet? Because I just want to collect them. If you could pass them to the middle, we'll have someone walk up the middle and take them right now. Well, I'm sure some people came in who had some questions. We're going to take them now if you got them, and we'll move forward. I do have a few things we'll talk about before we get started, but I just wanted to, as they're collecting that, I guess I'll move forward and get ready to move on with the presentation. All right, well, I appreciate everybody being here. I'm Mike Todd. I'm a Medina Township trustee. Our other two township trustees are here as well. Ray Jarrett right here, and Kendall Michael over there, the tall guy by the door. So the three of us are all working together. We're the combined executive and legislative body of the township. We have both powers, which is always an interesting mix. But it's a wonderful thing because it allows us to be a streamlined government to get things done relatively quickly. One of the things about a month and a half ago, we said we wanted to do a forum on fracking. And a lot of that had to do with things I've heard in the community. I have friends on both sides. I have friends that are in the industry. I have friends that are environmentalists. And a lot of them had different opinions and different things to say. I heard people come into meetings, and I've talked to people on the street, and some of them are more informed than others. Now, that's not necessarily a dig at anybody. What that means is information is always a good thing. So what my thought was to try to get together the two sides, relatively speaking, if there are sides, and that would generally be the people who have serious environmental concerns about fracking and the fracking industry and the industry itself. And so we put together a panel. The idea of this is to be informative. The idea is that we will answer questions. I have spoken to some of the speakers. I've asked them to not engage the audience directly. And the reason is we have a large group. We have a lot of people with a lot of different opinions. And we're trying to stay as much to the facts as possible. Now, I understand that when we say stay to the facts as much as possible, some people have a difference of opinion on what constitutes fact and what constitutes myth. Let's try to say that the whole purpose of this is to allow you, as a constituent, a voter, a Medina County resident, to make an independent decision based upon what you hear from the people who are in the industries and the fields. The idea is to allow you to make the decision. I can tell you that Adam Frederick and I have talked. The whole thing in both of our minds comes down to risk analysis. And it's what level of risk you're willing to take. And him and I come down on different sides of the issue. But at the end of the day, you all need to determine on your own, as an individual, what level of risk is acceptable to you. And that's really what the whole purpose of this is to give you the education or the information to allow you to have an educated opinion about what's an acceptable risk and what's not an acceptable risk. And when I say that, I don't mean to demean or belittle anybody. Risk is in everything we do. When we get in a car, we get on the road, if we're running late to work, and we say, am I going to go 80? Am I going to go 65? I bump up to 80, I'm going to increase my risk, right? So it's in everything we do. So to say that, you know, we don't balance risk in our daily lives, we absolutely do. So those are things that we're talking about. The format, the way that I've asked them to do it is that we're going to have two 30-minute sessions before we have a 10-minute break. Each side's going to have 30 minutes to give their opening statement or salvo, or however you want to call it, their presentation. And then at the end of the 30 minutes, we're going to have a 10-minute break. The purpose of that 10-minute break is to take the first round of questions. We're going to have a second round of 30 minutes for each side. And during that time, Lori and some of the other people that work for me are going to be going through those questions so we can get rid of the duplicative questions and move forward. The reason we're doing it this way, I can tell you, I've had a lot of experience dealing with groups. I've had a lot of experience dealing with emotionally charged issues. And I always find that if you can keep personal conflict and personal contact out of it, it makes it a lot easier to listen and to understand what the actual sides are. The more emotional it becomes, the less likely we are to keep our ears open and listen to the things that are important. And since there are large stakes here, I think the paper had asked me what I believe are large stakes. Well, for the state of Ohio, the stakes are big. The stakes are big in different ways. Obviously, our economy, I wouldn't call it a bustling economy. The state of Ohio has been in decline for 30, 40 years. And there's obviously opportunities in this area, in these fields, to make progress. Now, with that being said, on the other side, is to the extent that we feel that this is the road to make progress, there's obviously the concerns about the long-term environmental impacts. And long-term environmental impacts mean different things to different people. I was just, as in my other life, I'm an assistant county prosecutor in Summit County, and I did the trial for the Northeastern Ohio Regional Sewer District. And a lot of that came down to stormwater management and risk analysis and what we believe is necessary. And so the whole point is that you need to make that decision on your own. But I'm trying to make sure that we all respect each other, that we all understand that we have differences of opinion. In Medina County, we take pride in being a strong, civic-minded democracy. A linchpin of democracy is to have dissent, to have people that speak and have differences of thoughts and opinions, and to be able to voice those opinions, but at the same time, allow others to voice their opposition. So in this situation, all I ask is that everyone be respectful towards each other. I ask the same of the speakers. I ask that they not personally call out any other speaker individually. I ask that when a question is asked, that they answer it professionally, not cast any, I guess, disparaging comments on that. And I think by doing that, we'll be able to have a positive forum. Now, with that being said, I want to move forward into the presentation. Those were my opening comments. I did want to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance, because I always like to start a meeting off. It's good to know. But our flag. Anybody got a flag in their pocket? Do we have one on the screen that we can put up there? Anybody know? Visualize? All right. Well, let's stand up, because if we could, I'd ask you to cover your heart. You know, it is important. So think about the words as we say them. We'll pretend that the flag's up here, but I appreciate y'all's understanding. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Now, without any further ado, we're going to start the clock. What time are we at? Who's got a, Laura, you got your clock on here? What do we got? All right, so 6:51, I will start to pull my shepherd's hook out and come on up if someone's still speaking. But you all got 30 minutes, and we'll get started. Without any further ado, first, introduce yourself, tell everybody who you are, who you represent, and then you can go over to that microphone if you want.
Great. So first, thank you all for inviting me here today. My name is Steve Hosdovich. I am the Marcellus Shale Policy Associate with Clean Water Action. Clean Water Action is a national not-for-profit environmental organization. We have over 1 million members nationwide. We are not in Ohio. I come to you here today from our office in Pittsburgh. So that might lead to the question, well, why in the world are you here other than to visit a beautiful town and take a 2.5-hour drive on a sunny afternoon? I was asked to come today to speak about potential impacts to our environment, to our communities, and to our health from natural gas drilling operations, but also to share with you a perspective from Pennsylvania, where drilling is very heavy right now. And it is my hope that through my presentation, you will not only get a better understanding of what might potentially be a threat from this operation, but also learn from the lessons in Pennsylvania and be able to apply them here in Ohio before drilling really starts ramping up. So Mike already kind of asked the important question, and I've kind of phrased it a different way, and that's, is the juice worth the squeeze? You really have to assess whether or not the potential benefits that come from natural gas drilling, will they outweigh the potential impacts? And they certainly will not if we don't have the proper regulation and oversight in place to minimize those impacts. Under our former governor, Ed Rendell in Pennsylvania, his Department of Environmental Protection Secretary said that quote that I have up there about natural gas drilling boom would inevitably result in environmental damage, including possible water contamination supplies, and he firmly meant that, especially if Pennsylvania didn't do things necessary to stave that off. So some of the areas on the cover today are transportation issues, usage and disclosure of chemicals, cement casing, open impoundments or frac pits, treatment, air quality, and violations. And because I'm under a time crunch, I might go through this a little bit quickly. Transportation is a huge issue. This operation requires millions of gallons of water in order to do the frac. You also have flowback water that comes up after the frac job is done. What that means is you need to bring that water into a site potentially through trucks. You're also going to have to take it off of site at some point in time for treatment, or in the case of Ohio, for disposal in injection wells. According to Range Resources, who is one of the bigger operators in western Pennsylvania, a large fleet of truck services, the site including about 400 trucks coming and going. Now that's a lot of trucks, industrial-sized trucks, coming in and out of potentially a residential neighborhood. In Pennsylvania, what we've discovered is that our roads, especially in some of the more suburban areas from Pittsburgh, are not meant to withstand this type of weight on these back roads. So there needs to be some type of bonding in place, some type of commitment from the drillers that after they come through this area that they're going to repair any potential damage to roads. Otherwise it goes back on us, the taxpayers. You also have potentially air quality problems associated with all these diesel trucks moving up and down your road. They essentially emit a black exhaust that I'm sure we're all familiar with. That is scientifically known as PM 2.5, and large-term exposure to that can lead to respiratory issues like asthma. There was an operation done by our Pennsylvania State Police in which during a 2-day period they were inspecting trucks hauling wastewater, especially from drilling sites, and they inspected 731 trucks. They had 421 traffic citations, 824 written warnings, and 131 vehicles were ordered off the road. So inevitably, one of the major questions that comes up when we're talking about fracking is this image that everybody sees from Gasland, this flaming faucet type of thing. And what this really leads to is the question of what type of chemicals is the industry using in the fracking process to help open up the shale and release that gas. Now, we're talking about millions of gallons of water being used on a frac, and the industry says that they use only about 1% in terms of that entire fluid being made up of chemicals, which doesn't sound like a lot, but we're still talking around roughly 34,000 gallons of chemicals being used in the process, which is still a lot. Now, some of these chemicals have the potential to be very hazardous. In Pennsylvania, some of the things that are disclosed on our Department of Environmental Protection's website is stuff like ethylbenzene, which can lead to blood disorders, kidney damage, xylene, which can lead to neurotoxic effects and possible blood disorder, toluene, which can lead to respiratory issues and possible birth defects. There's also stuff that's not that toxic. In fact, often what we hear is, some of this stuff is often stuff you would find in common products within your household, under your kitchen sink, stuff like that. But the point is, there's stuff under my kitchen sink. Sure, it's not necessarily potentially toxic, but I'm still not going to drink it. I don't want to put any of that stuff in a glass of water. You couldn't get me to put anything like soap, detergent, or anything like that, or any chemicals associated with that in that bottle of water I have over there, which I desperately need right now. So the point is, we have to understand what the industry is using in terms of the chemicals they're using. Disclosure laws are different all across the states that have some type of natural gas drilling occurring. In Pennsylvania, basically what we have is on our Department of Environmental Protection's website, they give you a master list of 60 to 80 chemicals that could be used at any particular drill site in Pennsylvania. They don't disclose how much of it is going to be used. You just know that there's a possibility that it could be used. We also have something where, you know, the volumes aren't disclosed, but if there's a medical emergency, the industry will disclose for you will disclose to the medical professionals what type of chemicals and what volume they were being used in, so that they can properly treat the particular person who might have been negatively impacted by it. You have up there Ohio, I won't get into it, you can see it there. Colorado just touts itself now as having recently passed the most rigorous, what they claim is the most rigorous disclosure laws in the country, and you can see some of the stuff that's listed there as well. Cement casing is a big issue for us in Pennsylvania. Cement casing is used in the drilling process to protect the shallow aquifer underground that is often the source of people's well water. What we've discovered in Pennsylvania is several things. The cement that is being used is not built for resistance. That's the type of stuff we see in our buildings and our structures. The cement needed to protect the pipes is something that needs to be able to withstand the pressure of the frac itself. In Pennsylvania, we have a law that says you have to wait 8 hours until the cement solidifies before you can continue with your fracking job. What we're discovering is that there are a lot of violations for improper cement casings in Pennsylvania. I think from 2008 to 2011, we had somewhere over 200 particular instances where there was a cement casing violation, which is a very serious issue because that is our primary protection from this groundwater aquifer. In Dimock, Pennsylvania, which is in the eastern part, our Department of Environmental Protection had to assess a violation to Cabot Oil and Gas for a frac job in which they did not let the cement casing set. As a result, methane was able to seep out from the frac job and contaminate people's wells to the point that they could no longer use their water well, and the industry had to provide drinking water relief to those people. We also have an issue with storing your frac fluids or your wastewater or your flowback water. Often where this wastewater is stored when it comes back up after a frac job is in an open impoundment. This is not the best use for this is not the best storage for this wastewater. There are industry folks that are using a closed loop system where they store them in tankers as opposed to these open impoundments, which is a much preferable way of doing it. Why is that? Well, because these open impoundments are often to protect the soil lined with a synthetic liner. As you can see by that top picture, this liner can often tear, rip. In this case, it's falling down. We also have a lot of violations in Pennsylvania for these frac pits not having a 2-inch running port, and that's designed essentially to give a buffer from the top of that so that if you have heavy rainfall like we had this morning, you're not going to have an open impoundment with this wastewater filling up even more and winding up overflowing. In Pennsylvania, one of our major issues with this is that when that pit is done being used for an operation and the water is gone from it, all they have to do in Pennsylvania is fold up that liner into the pit and just bury it. You can see in the bottom part here, That is a frac pit in western Pennsylvania that wound up catching on fire very close to an individual's home. These are often mixed with, because you have a lot of chemicals in there, it's obviously highly flammable, but you also have a situation in which some of the lighter compounds associated with it wind up vaporizing off of it, and now you have an issue with smelling it. In Pennsylvania, one of our biggest issues was how do we treat or dispose of this wastewater, and this does actually directly affect you guys here in Ohio, because what used to happen to us in Pennsylvania is our primary means of disposing of this was by taking it to treatment facilities in Pennsylvania, municipal treatment facilities that were incapable of treating it for all its components, from the salt it picks up from the shale to the chemicals that are in it. So what happens is these local treatment facilities would just dilute it before they dumped it back into our rivers and streams. Close to Pittsburgh, where I live, a lot of these treatment facilities are along the Allegheny and Ohio River, and that's the primary drinking water source for Pittsburgh. So that raised a huge issue. Thankfully, our DEP actually stepped in and tried to do something about it, although they kind of went halfway on doing it. They asked the drillers in Pennsylvania to voluntarily stop taking this wastewater to our treatment facilities. Thankfully, many of them complied with it. They stopped taking, the majority of the industry in Pennsylvania stopped taking it to wastewater treatment facilities. Instead, what they were doing is recycling the water, using it for additional frac jobs that they might be doing in the area, or in this case, they're bringing it into your state for disposal into your underground injection wells. And in Pennsylvania, they have to do it for several reasons. One, we only have one facility that's built that's right dead smack in the center of our state that can properly treat it, but also because of our geography, we don't have the ability to have our own underground injection wells. We've got about like 8. I think they're trying to permit some more, but it's not anywhere near the magnitude Ohio has. We also have respiratory problems associated with this. You can see in the picture there, that's you looking at a condensate tank normally. Picture below is through infrared. You have vapors that can wind up coming off of this stuff, sometimes potentially harmful things. In a Colorado study from 2005 to 7, they found concentrations of benzene that were approaching or exceeding health-based standards. In a county in Wyoming, they were also experiencing fumes and vapors from a lot of their wells, and as a result, they wound up falling out of federal attainment for air quality. Landowners are certainly at risk for multiple reasons. The biggest is probably setbacks. In Pennsylvania, we just recently passed a law that increased our setbacks 500 feet from a structure, 300 feet from a waterway, and 1,000 feet from a public drinking water source. I still believe that that is woefully inadequate when we're talking about drilling next to somebody's home, next to a school, things along those lines. I was really shocked to see in Ohio that you guys are only 150 feet away from a structure. In some cases, it's even lower than that, 100. You've got a lot of different balls in the air when it comes to setbacks from structures. What we also have in Pennsylvania is a presumption of liability. If a company causes contamination of somebody's well water, it is incumbent upon them to prove that they didn't do it. If that happens within 12 months or within 2,500 feet of the actual drilling itself. One of the big concerns we have in Pennsylvania is because of new legislation that was passed, you're now allowed to drill in any type of zone in Pennsylvania. We had a big effort going on for a while. Some of you may have seen the ban in Pittsburgh, which can be argued on its legality, but a lot of municipalities were using their zoning powers to keep it out of residential areas. Now, that's not the case. The industry can drill in residential areas, they can drill in agricultural areas, it's all fair game to them. And one of the big things that I know concerns homeowners is what's it do to the value of your home? And the Federal Housing and Urban Development Department put out something that said that they want to approve loans for homes within 300 feet of an active planned site because drilling poses potential hazards from fire, explosions, things along those lines. What we're experiencing in Pennsylvania, from 2008 to 2011, another environmental organization that we work closely with, Penn Environment, did a study on violations in Pennsylvania. What they took from DEP's numbers in Pennsylvania was that in that time span we've had 3,355 violations in Pennsylvania that have been assessed. And we have a total of 4,596 wells drilled. You can see there are some on there that are very concerning. Improper waste management, faulty pollution prevention, the cement casing is on there, improper construction of wastewater impoundments. We're talking about some very serious violations that are happening there that wind up threatening our environment, they threaten our health, they threaten our communities. So this isn't a black and white issue. There are potential benefits to this, certainly, but the question is, do we have the oversight in place? Do we have the regulations in place to make sure that if it's going to happen in our state or in our communities, that it's consistently being done at a high level and being done in a way that protects us? And with that, I'll turn it over to one of my other colleagues. Thank you.